Good afternoon, everyone. For those tuning in late, we just heard from Karan Bajwa, the MD of Google Cloud, and Abhinav Lal of Tracto on the opportunities in health tech. Up next, we have an insightful panel discussion on the e-commerce sector titled What to Add to Your Tech Cart. This session will explore how to deliver a tech-led superior e-commerce experience and how to accelerate transformation across business by leveraging a suite of future-focused tech solutions. On the panel, we have Rakshit Daga, Vice President and CTO of BigBasket. Hello, Rakshit. Rakshit was previously the founder and CEO at Quarter and Director of Technology at SAP. Joining us also is Yash Dayal. He is the CTO of Zivame and comes with over a decade-long experience in working with internet technologies at Myntra and Jabong, Yahoo, Hypes, and among the others. Welcome again, Yash. Also joining this discussion from Google Cloud is Mitesh Agarwal, Director of Customer Engineering, Google Cloud. Mitesh began his career with the Indian tech giant Wipro before working with other marquee Indian names in the tech industry. He then had a near decade-long stint with Oracle before joining Google. Welcome aboard, Mitesh. As you all know, the e-commerce segment seems to be in the sweet spot as it is essential for the safe and contactless delivery of goods in the COVID-19 environment. The grocery delivery space might get a big boost this year as the market continues to understand and interpret the new model. Making an active investment in tech will help e-commerce be better positioned to achieve successful market results in the future. So let me begin with a round of questions for the panel. This has been a very tumultuous year for business, but there are a few green shoots emerging for some sectors, especially e-commerce. How would you sum up how the pandemic has affected your business growth and opportunities in the past few months? Let's begin with you, Rakshit.
Thank you for having me on this panel. Look forward to a very insightful discussion. Your question, of course, is completely valid. Since COVID has started, business has changed dramatically for companies like BigBasket. Clearly, in the early days of the lockdown, what we saw was there was unforeseen demand. And we also had several operational challenges in terms of our ability to fulfill orders, primarily because a lot of the workforce wasn't able to come. Right, so there was a two-pronged thing that happened. One, operations were impacted because of the workforce not being available. Second, the number of people who were actually on our app and sites climbed around sixfold. So during that time, what we had to do was obviously take steps both from a technology standpoint as well as an operational standpoint. But since then, all of business for BigBasket has recovered. We've hired a significant number of new people. The technology has adapted to the new reality, which is a COVID reality. Business overall, for companies like BigBasket, I think the outcome has been positive in terms of the bottom line. But clearly, there is a lot to be done in terms of how we keep addressing the growing demand.
Thanks, Rakshit. Let me ask Yash the same question. Yash, what have been your responses and feedback on how the COVID pandemic panned out in your case?
Sure. So I think you summarized it quite well. So I think while I think it's very unprecedented and unfortunate times that we're living in currently, right? So I think what I wanted to also call out is it's a very real impact which is there in the world, and I think. And it's taken a big toll on everybody and also on the consumer sentiment. Some of this we can actually see in the numbers which we are seeing for the economy. But I think when you said green shoots, so thankfully there is a little bit of a change which is happening on e-commerce and for online and digital shopping. I think it has kind of acted as a little bit of a forcing function. So for instance, people who were very comfortable with only offline shopping. Some of them have been actually nudged to try out online shopping because of the circumstances. And although we are seeing business coming back, but I think it's still very far from like back to what business is doing. I would not actually say that business is booming, but I think we are seeing good growth into coming back to good times.
Let me ask you one more question, Yash. How were you able to streamline operations now? Now it's been almost 6-7 months since the COVID lockdown began, etc. So how are things being streamlined now? Is it still a rough patch or things are on an even keel right now?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. I think it's been a very interesting journey. So right from when lockdown started, when we had the full lockdown in the country, and at that time I think only essential items delivery was being allowed. It's been an effort from all across the company as well as our supply chain partners to ensure that we are able to come and build a seamless experience. Um, I would actually rephrase it to a reasonable seamless experience because there's lots of challenges, right? So even today, right, we have places where there are red zones and we are not able to do deliveries. And I think the idea here is that everyone has to come together and figure out how to make things happen, right? So there may be multiple courier providers who would be delivering to that area, and there are challenges which we see. So, for example, uh, some channel of delivery to a particular location which was active today may not be active tomorrow. Maybe that location itself where deliveries were happening actually goes into quarantine. And then also for Zivame, there's a lot of inbound products and supply chain which comes in. That also has an impact. In fact, because depending on how the vendors are, which zones the vendors are in, how is the supply chain between the vendors and us. So there were lots of challenges, but I think we have a very enthusiastic team and very supportive vendors and suppliers as well as our courier partner. So we were able to manage this.
How about in your case, Rakshit? How were you able to streamline operations? Are you back at pre-COVID levels? Have you exceeded these levels? Where are you in your journey now?
We in fact have far exceeded our levels, right? So because we are in the grocery space and we are such a mandatory part of everybody's buying experience, and given that people were not venturing out as much or not comfortable going back to their usual ways of shopping, so I think for us we've grown 60% since the pre-COVID highs. So in terms of that, we moved a pre-COVID situation where business was growing at a steady pace. Then the lockdown happened and all of business came to a standstill. And then suddenly, as soon as we were able to get our operations sorted, get our business actually boomed quite a bit. And it's been a great learning experience for us over the last 6 months, right? Not only have we brought forth new solutions to the market, which are keeping realities in mind. Things like you mentioned, right? Contactless delivery, being able to grant tokens instead of in several locations where the demand was much higher than we could possibly meet, and so on. So some of these things have actually gotten us thinking on our feet. We tackle problems and solve the supply chain issues as they happen. We figured out how to solve, for example, how do we stack faster in the warehouse? How do we pick faster? So we are doing more with less. That's become kind of the mantra at BigBasket. And the outcome also has been quite substantially good for business because, like I said, we are at 60% higher revenue than what we were back in March or before March.
Oh, that's good to hear, Rakshit. Let me bring Mitesh into the discussion now. Mitesh, we've heard from our speakers now that demand is coming back up to almost peak levels and maybe even increasing peak levels. So how is Google Cloud helping companies manage this peak demand and make sure that they don't go down? Any comments from you, Mitesh?
Yeah, thank you, Madan. Thank you for the opportunity. Great to be with us, you and Yash on the panel. Thank you very much. Interestingly, big user of both the properties that Yash and Rakshit manage. So both, one on my wife's side and both on my wife's side, I guess, right? Big user. So thank you for, helping us through the pandemic. Very interestingly, there are things that come to mind when we think of what's happened over the last few months. In fact, there are two quotes that come to mind. One is, that there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks where decades happen. So very clearly, that's been the story of our lives, even from a Google Cloud perspective. But the more interesting one that I think Yash and, Rakshit would relate to is that, in the technology world, we never let a crisis go waste. right? So as we entered the pandemic, right, there are a number of things that Google has historically done and we continue to do. I think we essentially, instead of looking at the new normal, we started looking at a better normal. We decided that, fundamentally businesses from a technology perspective need to hope for the best, but plan for the worst, right? Because even the best laid out plans, whether they were BCP plans, whether they were scale up plans, scale out plans, all of them, started getting tested during the pandemic. Remote became like core to everything that we started doing, whether it was a remote workforce, whether it was remote access, whether it was remote delivery, touchless delivery, and so on and so forth. Now, very interestingly, Google invented a number of things that we use to, scale up our own properties, whether they are YouTube, whether they are maps, and so on and so forth. We invented the renowned practice of site reliability engineering, which became super important during the pandemic. Interestingly, when the pandemic began, many organizations expected a slowdown in their digital strategy. Instead, as we all know, we saw the opposite. Most customers started accelerating their use of cloud-based services for digital acceleration. Our observation has been that the application developers typically ended up spending a quarter of their time more as amateur system engineers. And they were spending so much of their time troubleshooting things, scaling things rather than building new products that Google started ensuring that site reliability engineering moved to what is called customer reliability engineering. In fact, I do know that both the esteemed guests on the panel, their teams use these concepts that Google invented. The other part really is where really Google Cloud shines, I think, is scaling much faster, which is very, very important. Instead of scaling in minutes or hours, we started scaling in seconds. Not just scale up, but you also had the ability to scale down because there were businesses, that were affected in the pandemic. So we needed to scale down to zero as well. Interestingly, on the technology part of things, we did not require any pre-warming, require for load balancing. A lot of our services do not require any warm up at all, which meant that, you could scale much faster as you required things. Now, very interestingly, one of the things that we started doing was, we also started doing a lot of white glove services, for the pandemic. As we all know, as we speak, there are a number of, e-commerce players that are going through their sale days and so on. During the pandemic, this happened too. So we started providing white glove services around that. And one of the other interesting things that I'm sure we'll talk about as we move forward is that there were a number of vulnerabilities that we discovered, in the way people operated their digital services. So we started allowing things like live migration to allow for patching without having to bring, your virtual machines down, as an example. So what Google is essentially did is focused on not just the employee remote workforce part, right? We also help the customers in the e-commerce world really running their businesses, being able to deliver, being able to track with maps, giving the API integration faster, and really being able to spin up and spin down much faster. So that's the way we've generally innovated and then layered it with site reliability engineering to make sure they're always up and running.
Thanks, Mitesh. Yes, staying up and running is always very important for our retailers on this panel. My next question to the panel is, it's one thing to talk about the quantity of transactions and data. What's also important is the quality of insights you get about your customers. So my question to Rakshit next is, what kind of insights are you getting from the data and how are you using these insights to give a better user experience for your retail customers? Rakshit?
Sure. So that's a great question. And for us, clearly, all parts of our business are completely data-driven. For example, even the assortment we stock in our warehouses is completely dynamically decided based on the buying patterns of certain users. So as you may or may not have noticed, in different parts of Bangalore, for example, is different. So based on where you are, what your geographical location is, what your buying patterns are, the assortment gets adjusted automatically. So it's one thing to adjust the assortment that is visible to the customer, but what goes behind the scenes is also quite important, right? It really, in an e-commerce scenario, what it means is that your whole supply chain has to be adjusted to cater to this. How often do you request these goods from your suppliers? When does, how often do you, for example, make sure that these items are stocked in your warehouses? What is the stocking behavior? What kind of manpower do you need to actually stack these goods once they arrive? And to do it sustainably in an economically sustainable way is really the holy grail that we chase as an e-commerce company, especially in the grocery space. That's one. Then there are a number of other things, for example, which are customer facing that we leverage or use to actually drive behavior, which allows the customer to see and browse what we think they want to buy. So if you go to the BigBasket app, for example, there is a feature called Smart Basket, where we are trying to predict what your buying behavior is going to be based on your historical buying. Did you buy atta last week? Did you buy atta last month? Are you? Is it likely that you're going to replenish it? Should we show it at the top of the smart basket or bottom? So we use a lot of ML/AI to actually figure out what the likely buying patterns of a customer is. If you buy a certain product, what else are you likely to buy? So some of these things are seamlessly integrated into the customer's journey as they navigate through the app or the website. Right. Then there's obviously the usage of data in logistics, right? Last mile delivery, how efficient, how do you make sure day in and day out every single order reaches the customer on time? How do you optimize your workforce to the number of orders that you have to deliver? How do you make sure that every route that is getting delivered is optimal in nature? So like I said, data is across everything that we do. I just highlighted a few examples of how we use data.
Those are very good examples, Rakshit. Let's turn to Yash now. Yash, what's your story? What kind of insights are you getting about current behaviors and how you're using this to improve experience for your users?
Sure. So I think I would echo a lot of the things which Rakshit said. I think in order to survive in today's industry, I think every company needs to be like very strongly data focused, and I think Zivame is no exception. So we are also very strong data driven organization, and another interesting aspect of Zivame is that we are also an omni channel platform. So data becomes even more important, and then we have a lot of systems which are actually trying to collate data from customers who are interacting on a website. In addition to whatever sales are happening in our physical retail stores, all of that data is actually collated together. Inventory is a big part of omni-channel. So in order to ensure that customers have the same view of the inventory, irrespective of whether they're coming online or they're actually going to a physical store. I think so. Basically, data is like really, really important everywhere. One of our objectives is also to have the same ubiquitous Zivame experience, no matter where the customer is shopping from. So this means that a lot of things like the pricing, right? So for instance, if a customer is if she's coming online or if she's actually going into a physical store, we will have the same pricing. And all of this is actually powered by having strong data and strong data pipelines. I have one very interesting thing. So I think similar to what Rakshit said, right? So based on the geography, different people living in different geographies may have slightly different buying patterns or consumption patterns, right? So this is a very key thing that we do. So whenever we're opening a new physical store, instead of if you look at a traditional brick and mortar company, what they would do is they would look at what is being selling in the nearby stores and then do an extrapolation, and then stock it initially, and then over a period of time you would keep revising it. With us being omni-channel, I think one of the advantages we have is we can actually look at what are the digital orders which people living in that area have done, and based on that you are able to assess what is the initial inventory that you want to go in and open the store with. And all the other standard things, having recommendations for customers. If you're browsing some particular category, recommending other similar items or recommending items which actually go along with that particular things that you're browsing. trying to we are building strong personalization throughout the platform, and all of this is all built on data and data-driven approaches.
Let me ask you one more question, Yash. You're operating across cities, across channels, across verticals also. So how are you leveraging tech solutions to operate across this full spectrum?
Yeah, so I think the cloud is a big boon for us. I think we are completely on cloud, and I think that acts as a good enabler, especially as as what Mitesh mentioned, right? So especially in e-commerce, we have these huge spikes. So you have these huge spikes of traffic, especially when we're doing these large sales. So that's where cloud actually helps us. So whenever we're doing a large sale, we're able to scale up our machines, handle the peak traffic. And once the sale is over, then we're able to scale down to reduce our server costs again. And some of these peaks in the industry are, you will actually see about 10 times of your BAU traffic. So these are like huge peaks which come in, and this is where cloud actually really helps.
How about you, Rakshit? You're also in so many verticals. Every other day, you seem to be adding a new city, a new offering, a new line of products and services. So how are you expanding across verticals, for example? How is technology, what kinds of technologies are you using to expand across verticals? Rakshit?
Sure. So I think over the last couple of years, BigBasket has evolved from being an application to a platform, right? And some of these thoughts and ideas have been ingrained into the architecture. So we are building to a goal where a lot of the supply chain, different metaphors of different supply chains can be modeled into the same platform. So the idea really is you have a bunch of horizontal microservices which play a specific role, and each of these can actually be modeled to different business situations. To give you an example, we do consumer facing, we have a consumer facing application, we have a B2B application as well. All of this uses the same underlying infrastructure. Like Yash mentioned, we are also completely 100% on the cloud. And due to the nature of our business, grocery, for example, there are specific buying patterns to grocery. The first week of the month is typically a high demand period. Weekends are typically high demand periods. Business spikes during certain times of the day. So the infrastructure keeps scaling up based on demand. And essentially, the key, in my opinion, is really to create a platform infrastructure which allows you to model different business situations in the e-commerce world. And that's what we are aggressively driving at.
Thanks, Rakshit. Let me ask Mitesh a question now. Mitesh, we clearly have very diverse kinds of customers here on a panel today. So how does Google help customize solutions for different kinds of e-commerce players? Mitesh?
Yeah, thanks, Badal. It was very interesting hearing Yash and Rakshit. They're both, organizations that are completely digital, completely on the cloud, data-driven, and so on. All elements with which I think Google was born with as well. We have the saying within Google, I think, which is fairly popular now, saying that in God we trust, everybody else must bring data. So I think it applies very much with, what Yash and Rakshit both said. Having said that, specifically for e-commerce, we have a number of solutions that really, can encapsulate things. I'll kind of split them into four broad areas. We have a recommendation AI, very close to what, for example, the example that Rakshit gave, right? If somebody, generally buys atta at the beginning of the month, then what's the closest that you can, do with that? Maybe they also want Bengal gram. Right. So the recommendation AI really draws on the experience and expertise in machine learning to deliver a very personalized recommendation that will suit each and every customer's taste and preference across all the touch points. Now, the touch point part is where I think I heard Yash speak about omni-channel, right? So they have offline stores as well, and they would have had a lot of data of customers, going to their offline stores. But during the pandemic, when everything was online, how do you now carry forward these tastes and preferences across all your touch points, right? So we have a recommendation AI, a very strong and popular, engine that, a lot of our customers use. The second part is we have another API called the Vision API for product search. This allows retailers to really, create products that contain like reference images that visually describe the product from a set of viewpoints. And that's been a very interesting thing. So as people started going on to platforms like BigBasket, for example, or Zivame, they may not know exactly, like I use the term Bengal gram for a very specific reason, right? That's called various things in various languages. Now, how do you, visually see that and, match your product search, categories along with that, whether it's home goods, whether it's apparel, toys, packaged goods, or, apparel that, Zivame sells and so on and so forth, right? So we have a very strong vision API for product search. The third part, which has been very interesting, especially during the pandemic, has been the whole notion of a contact center AI. Now, obviously, if you couldn't have, your employees or the outsourced contact center, where people had to, talk for support, issues on delivery, and so on and so forth, how do you deliver, exceptional customer experience and still increase your operational efficiency? So we really use AI core to the principle there. We enable a virtual agent to, converse naturally in a number of Indian languages. You won't even feel the difference, as we all know, right? They expertly assist using human agents, and you pass on for complex cases to human agents. A lot of NLP and a lot of local vernacular language processing that we've done. The fourth one, which is very interesting, is the whole optimization AI. So we have a whole cloud optimization AI for fleet routing and scheduling that can completely automate your last mile route creation and also output the most optimal parts for vehicles, right? Especially, we've had dramatic shifts because of COVID, in the supply chain, in the way the fleets, increased demand. You had a lot of issues, with respect to, the way we could efficiently route your supply chain and so on. So customers are like increasingly, demanding better services in the form of like immediate delivery. In the case of like BigBasket, I know that, they also have something called BB Daily, right? That essentially you can, make sure that you get it the next day. How do you get all of these services in real time? So there are a number of solutions that we have for this. And very interestingly, one aspect of this is speed, right? There are a number of studies that have said that, the impact of responsiveness has an impact on conversion. And one study that, really found that, for every 100 millisecond of latency, it cost an e-commerce player 1% of their sales. That's big. And therefore, what we've done is that while we've done all of these APIs, for us, speed and performance matters. So the ability to scale up and scale down very, very quickly at scale, at speed, it was super helpful, I think, during the COVID, pandemic, and as we continue moving forward.
Thanks, Mitesh. As you rightly said, efficiency must be there, but not at the cost of experience. You need to play in both spaces at the same time. So that brings up a very good question now for Rakshit and Yash, which is we're now coming to the festive season where it's very important not to have stockouts, where inventory must be extremely accurate, so on and so forth. So Rakshit, how are you handling this challenge of making sure there's no stockout and having a lot of inventory accuracy and meeting all this huge spike in demand? Rakshit?
Sure. So, like you said, it's really an interesting time, not only from a post-COVID scenario, but it's also the festive season. And really, I think the answer goes back to your last question. Rely on the data to figure out what you are expecting, right? So we look at historic patterns. We have a number of to forecast who is going to buy what is the total demand we foresee. We also try and adjust the demand against historical supply patterns. For example, if we realize the supplier is supplying less than what we expect them to, we either look for alternatives or we request for more than our usual needs. Right? So some of those things are actually coded into the algorithms that we use to bring inventory. And then the other thing, I think Yash talked about this before, is everything that the customer sees is completely driven by the inventory. So there is a term in the industry we use, which is the so-called fill rate. And especially in an industry like grocery, having a high fill rate is very, very important. So what that really means is when we show a customer something, some SKU is available, it really is indeed available, and our customer makes that buy, you actually lock that SKU for him in the warehouse that he is going to buy, right? So managing all of this is obviously driven by a lot of technology in the background, making sure that we are predicting customer patterns, making sure that there's enough stock in the warehouses, making sure that we're able to forecast what the season is going to look like. So all of these go hand in hand in trying to solve the problem that you're talking about.
Okay, let me ask you one more question now about go-to-market. I'm sure you're coming up with a lot of new offerings, for example, for the festive season. How do you reduce go-to-market time for each of these new kinds of offerings you're coming up with? How does technology help you?
Absolutely. So, like you said, a lot of this is, for example, using some core technology principles like marketing automation, personalization, etc. So, for example, we recently launched a platform which allows us to do pricing at the most granular level, right? Even to a single customer, we are able to actually design campaigns for them, design offerings for them, and all of these are a matter of marketing team decides to launch an offer. All they need to do is go to the platform, design their campaign, set up a few configurations, design the segment that they are targeting, and voila, it actually shows up on the customer's screen. And really, the time gap between defining a campaign to actually taking it live is minutes. There's all you need to do is make sure that operationally, if, for example, you're promoting a certain product or if a certain vendor is actually interested in discounting, the supply side is sort of figured out. We do predictions of demand. We make sure that these items are stocked into our warehouses. But then the digital part of it, which is really the setting up of the campaign and making sure that this campaign goes live and is available for customers to consume, it happens in a matter of minutes. And really, that's a testament to the technology backbone that we've been able to build over the last few years.
Okay, let me ask Mitesh another question, which is connected to what you just mentioned, which is, Mitesh, there's a lot of opportunity as data volumes increase, but there are also challenges with respect to security. Unfortunately, in this increasingly digital world, there's a lot of unscrupulous elements, shall we say, out there. So how do you make sure that data stays secure when all these e-commerce players have so much at stake in what's happening right now?
That's a great question. If you really look at it, our goal at Google Cloud Security is really help our customers, as they say, reach a better normal and not just the new normal. You are absolutely right. Security has been like a core and center, of discussions even before the pandemic. But I think during the pandemic, we really discovered that it's just not just the technology part, but also the process part that was very important. Customers, really were not completely prepared around that area. And we are focused on, doing the whole security piece done in a couple of ways. The first is like we make security operations easier. So doing this can help really free up resources, for the second part, which is executing on the new priorities. So we just heard Rakshit speak about, the whole, what will happen during the new festive season, what are the new products that they can launch and so on. Really, you want to be executing on those priorities as opposed to, bothering about your security operations. So the way we've done this is that we protect the users, we protect the user data, we protect the applications, and we still stay compliant in these challenging times. And what do I mean by that? It's extremely important that we go ahead and ensure that, all of the e-commerce players have a huge payment, obligation, a payment engine, partnerships and APIs with a lot of payment providers and so on. Fortunately, we've got some very unique and powerful capabilities to really simplify security operations. I'll talk about like 3 or 4, that'll immediately, I think, relate back to a lot of what Rakshit and Yash have spoken till now. The first one is, for example, we just launched something called confidential computing. So in Google Cloud, everything is encrypted by default, whether in transit or rest. And this is super important. With confidential computing, we've taken it a notch higher. We allow our customers to encrypt even their data when it is in compute or in memory. Now, this is a very important differentiator, especially when we are saying that it's absolutely with minimal overheads, right? So confidential computing could be super important, especially in a digital-only sort of world. The second is that we launched an API called the DLP API. And as we all know, data leaks are, very common these days, whether it is with malicious intent or with ill intent and so on. So the DLP API really allows our customers to know if sensitive data, for example, Aadhaar card or PAN card data has not been exposed in places where it shouldn't be. So this is a constant sweep and audit that keeps happening across your infrastructure, application, data, all of this landscape. The third part is what we call as cloud armor. So as you build out your system, on the cloud, it is very important for our customers to keep this out of reach from hackers, right? So cloud armor really provides you the world's only programmatic L7 security system. Now, this is super important. There is no other programmatic L7 security system on the cloud, and Cloud Armor allows you to do that. So this really keeps hackers at bay. We also have seen, especially in e-commerce, the use of what we call reCAPTCHA enterprise. So content farming is a real challenge, right? That all our retail customers are facing. So reCAPTCHA really allows you to prevent bots and content farming on your sites so that only real requests go through. Otherwise, you'll have huge amount of distributed denial of service attacks. You could have a lot of fake IDs getting created and a lot of unnecessary load that comes in your system. So reCAPTCHA Enterprise really allows you that. Now, on the employee side, because this is all for the enterprise, for the customers, for the e-commerce players to serve. On the employee side, we have a very unique solution called BeyondCorp Remote Access. BeyondCorp Remote Access really provides user-friendly, zero trust access to internal apps without a VPN. Now, this was very important. This was a big learning that we saw in the last 6 or 7 months, where really a lot of customers did not have VPN access and did not have this set up for their employees. So what BeyondCorp really allows is that it allows you a zero trust access system to all the internal apps without a VPN. Now, super important, for a lot of our, organizations that really had employees working remotely, deliveries happening, of course, where they never came back to an office and so on and so forth. So these were a few areas where really, Google Cloud really executed the security part to reach a better normal. The first, to just summarize, is making security operations easier. The others to execute to the new priorities.
Speaking of priorities, we're coming towards the end of this session. So let me ask Rakshit a question. What are your priorities now coming up to this new normal? Some people call it the next normal. So whatever you want to call the next normal, how are you planning? How are you prioritizing your activities and your strategy for the coming months? Rakshit?
Sure. So I think our biggest priority at this point is to come to the next logical step in the evolution of our platform. And by that, what I mean really is set up the platform in such a way that we are able to experiment with different technologies and algorithms, right? And for us in the grocery business, which varies so much geography to geography, what you really want to be able to do is set yourself up for experimentation. So the technology platform allows us, what I want to take us down a path is, we want to create a platform where we are able to plug in algorithms and run these algorithms in different locations, try and experiment on the outcomes. And when a certain thing works, we're able to quickly roll that out across the country. And we know that technology is a constantly evolving thing, and each area that we are working, we're continuously going to have improvements in technologies that are coming up. How do you create a sustainable platform that allows you to plug in these technologies? So that's really the holy grail that we are chasing from a platform standpoint. So that's what I'm looking to do in the next 6 to 9 months at BigBasket.
How about you now, Yash? We were just talking a bit earlier about the festive season and how to make sure there is no inventory stockouts or no inaccurate inventory forecast, things of that sort. What are some of your steps for the festive season and beyond for the new normal? Yash?
Yeah, so your question is for the festive season. So again, I'll revert back a little bit to my earlier answer of data-driven decisions. So I think we've been in this industry for a few years. So I think we have, again, this is very data-driven approaches that we take. So we know historical data of how the festive seasons have actually have been working out for us. Of course, this year, because of the big change and the new normal, there will be some differences. But largely, I think banking on previous data and doing a lot of predictive analytics to understand what are some of the products which customers are looking for during this point of time, and then accordingly stocking our physical stores, stocking our warehouses, and etc.
And how about some of your priorities? Your priorities.
So one of the always ongoing optimizations or improvement in customer experience that we do is the Zivame Fit code. Right? So So traditionally, so I think to understand the value of that, you have to actually take a step back and look at how women shop for intimate wear before Zivame was there, or before any of these before Zivame was there. So people would typically go to a retail store, mostly manned by men, and it was very difficult to assess what kind of article or clothing actually fit you well, right? And it was a very at least for most women, it was also not a very comfortable experience. So this is where Zivame Fit Code actually comes in. And the idea here is that this, especially during COVID times, you can actually you can take this in the safety and hygiene of your home. And there are a couple of questions that you have to answer. You come to Zivame, you can answer a few of these questions, and that actually helps you. That gives you a fit code, and using that fit code, you can shop for products, and you'll be within assurance that whatever you shop for are products which actually suit you really well and will fit you properly. And again, putting a little bit of the omni-channel part here. So once you have the Zivame Fit code, you can actually also walk into the stores with this Fit code, and you can just buy products without actually even trying them on, because you know that if you have the Fit code, these will actually work for you. And the vice versa of that also works. So for example, if you can also go into a Zivame store. They can actually they can give you can do like a professional fitting done. Post that also, you will get the same fit code, and with that you can actually shop that online as well. So I think some of these and we keep working on iterations of these and improving the algorithm of this. So I think that is one of the things we're trying to do for.
Thanks. Just to wrap up, let me ask all the panelists just one question, which is in just one or two sentences, what advice would you give to all the aspiring entrepreneurs in our audience on how to extract business benefit from technology? In just one or two sentences. Yash, why don't you begin?
Yeah, I think at least one thing which I see is which is there in our industry, and which is given where technology is, change is inevitable. So I think the idea is to I think also, as Rakshit mentioned, right, try out many things and try to do as find simpler ways and less costly ways of doing experimentation. With that, you'll be able to experiment with different types of technology, different type of algorithms, and then see which is the one which works best for you. And it's not the end there. So even if you have identified an algorithm which works currently, but again, change is inevitable. So maybe 1 year or 2 years down the line, the same algorithm doesn't work. So you have to keep on experimenting and keep on trying new things on technology, and you have to do what is the best possible for the current time.
Rakshit, before we wrap up, another couple of sentences from you.
Sure. So I think one thing that I've learned over the last few years is there is a right time and place for technology. And as technologists, obviously, we love to do technology for technology's sake. But the real key is to identifying whether a technology's time has arrived in our situation or in the entrepreneur specific situation. So making sure that you are picking the technology which is most suitable to your needs, right? Don't get too carried away in terms of trying to do the latest and greatest in terms of technology. Try to make sure that you are chasing a practical problem, which is very, very important for you to specific business, right? So there is that thin line that you have to walk between trying out new technology as well as making sure that there is practical utility of whatever choices you are making. So that's my advice.
Very well, Rakshit. Very well said, Rakshit. Thank you so much. Now, Mitesh, you have the last word. What are your pieces of advice for the people in the audience on how to extract business benefit from technology? Mitesh?
Yeah, thank you. I could have simply summarized saying that, use Google and Google Cloud, but I won't do a sales plug, right? And simply say that, the way I would look at it is that, we are kind of in the third phase of the pandemic, right? Which is the recovery phase. And I think there is a massive opportunity for all the startups, the digital natives, to learn from what others have done and really be able to reimagine how they can use technology to transform their businesses, the lives of the customers that they serve, and also a lot of the industries, a lot of their suppliers are dependent on them. So I think really what we can do is reimagine this with technology. And of course, learn from great work that has been done by, BigBasket, but done by Zivame and a number of other startups. So really my theme would be, how can we reimagine, and transform businesses using, technology?
Thank you all so much for your outstanding views and mind share on these very important topics. With this, we come to the end of our session today on innovation in the digital age, innovating for the billions, powered by Google Cloud. Thanks once again to the panelists and the keynote speakers for their time, inputs, and valuable insights. You all have a very good evening now. Thank you.